Yeah, I'm Anthony Bresnikan. I'm a writer with Vanity Fair. Thanks for joining us here at the ATX Television Festival, the virtual version. Let's punch it and get right into the galaxy. Allow me to welcome the makers of The Mandalorian, beginning with executive producer and creator and writer Jon Favreau. Hello. There he is. There's the man. Executive producer and director of Chapter 1 and the director and writer of Chapter 5, The Gunslinger, Dave Filoni. Hello. Hello, Dave. Rick Famuyiwa, director of Chapter 2, The Child, and director and co-writer of Chapter 6, The Prisoner. There he is.
Hey there, Wink.
And Deborah Chow, she directed Chapter 3, The Sin, and Chapter 7, The Reckoning.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah. Bryce Dallas Howard, director of Chapter 4, Sanctuary. Hello. And finally, Taika Waititi. He's the voice of IG-11 and director of the final chapter, Redemption.
Indeed.
Welcome, the filmmakers of The Mandalorian. When was the last time you guys were all together? Was it when the show was first launching?
Probably. Wasn't it that big barbecue last night?
Yeah. No.
When was the last time you were with anybody?
Did you hire a cinematographer for this? You have amazing lighting. What's going on there?
I know.
She's the news director. You, Bryce. You're the
me?
director and you have the best lighting.
Why? Thank you. I'm using something called the makeup light. And I'm in the middle of a press day for dads. I'm like junketing.
Dads, like great movie. I saw it. It's a documentary Bryce did. It's really cool. So let's make this a press day for part of your press day for dads. Really awesome. And as a dad, made me very proud to be a dad. So well done.
No, I'm gonna do a Taika. I need my puffy lighting here.
So I want to begin by asking three of you about your performance in The Mandalorian. It's in Rick's episode in Chapter 6, The Reckoning. Dave, Rick.
Love it all, and I had this funny idea that it'd be neat if, Deb and Rick and I, because we were around a lot together shooting, just play these X-Wing pilots. And, John was always telling me that it's good to get in front of the camera as a director to get the experience. And so I thought, well, that'd be a fun way to do it. And I just kind of threw it off the cuff as a joke. And then I saw John's eyes light up when I said it. And I thought, oh, no, I think that is a good idea. And I thought he'd shut it down right away, at the interest of keeping the quality of the show high. But that wasn't the case. And John, what you learn about him quickly was when he likes an idea, he'll seize on it. And he really held us to it. But I think people don't realize, right up till the day we shot it, all three of us were like, I don't think we're going to do this. And if one of us bailed, the other two were going to be really mad. And I seriously only did it because I was going to get on a plane and head back up north. I only did it to avoid John just giving me hell the rest of my life that I chickened out of it. And to his credit, it was a very valuable experience doing it.
Yeah.
It was.
It's one of my favorite moments of the whole season. It looked so cool, and they look like, if you've ever seen like fighter pilots or airplane pilots, like especially like in the middle of a crisis, they're so cool and so understated, and they really captured it. I especially like Deb when she's like, "I'm going to go in and take him out," touching her, totally calm, and then you cut to this probably the biggest moment, as far as scale goes in our show, which is a space station being attacked by a squadron of X-Wings.
Are those X-Wings?
Yep, that's definitely a tracking beacon. Looks like they're launching a gunship.
Copy, going in.
Well, let's go back to the very beginning, John. Before there was any production or a writer's room, or before it was even greenlit, you had an idea for this show. What were the earliest pieces of that idea? Was it The Mandalorian? Was it The Child? Which came first?
It was The Mandalorian, and it was specifically doing a version of Star Wars that felt very small and felt like it reflected the genres that influenced George originally. So, a space adventure westerns, samurai films, World War II adventure films. Those were the ones. Those were the genres that originally inspired the tropes for the original films that I grew up with. Because I remember seeing the original film in the theater and just being completely captivated by it, and remembering that my father appreciated it on a different level because he grew up with the same movies that George grew up with. And so these were at once original, but also a reflection of our cinematic past. And so coming in very simple, because Star Wars, over the course of having the original trilogy, then the prequels and the sequels, well, the sequels hadn't happened yet. They were sort of happening concurrently with this. But there's so much story and so many characters, and sometimes it's daunting for people to enter into something if they don't have the relationship with the material. And I thought it would be really fun to just start with a new set of characters so that people who were, especially younger people who might not have the history that we did, they could be invited into the world of Star Wars. And the notion of that iconic Mandalorian, because we all loved Boba Fett, but we never got as much of him as we all wanted. And he kind of came to an unceremonious end in Return of the Jedi. And so somebody that could kind of live up to what we had hoped to see when we were younger. And also I had worked with Dave Filoni, and he had told a lot of Mandalorian stories on the Clone Wars. And I was lucky enough to have been a voice on that. And so I got to know the backstory of those characters. And as the extended universe and the animated series fleshed it out more, it seemed like there was a really good opportunity to delve deeper into this world and show a character that was very iconic with the mask. And then, of course, the end of the first episode was him changing and not just being a ruthless bounty hunter, as we kind of presented the series as, but instead found this really vulnerable character in the baby that he had to make a decision whether he was going to fulfill his obligation as a bounty hunter or if something in his soul was going to awaken, causing him to take on the cause of protecting this young child.
Wait, they said 50 years old.
Species age differently. Perhaps it could live many centuries. Sadly, we'll never know.
No.
It reminded me of when I grew up, I didn't really know what was coming in a movie. You'd go see the movie and experience it through the story as you were meant to. And John and I very much wanted the audience to have that feeling when they watched The Mandalorian, and for the reveal to be authentic, so you experienced it. You found, the child with Mando. That was really important. And I also felt, just reading John's script, that it was really key to show this guy as this kind of, he doesn't really care. He's heartless. He's a gunslinger. I've got a job to do. It's nothing personal. That's such a strong archetype from those movies. And the first part of that story is very much that. And it all builds and builds and builds to this critical decision where the child sparks something in him. And I felt it could really spark something in the audience as well, in which, it seems like it really did. But once you get that, character in his little pram and light him, and it just takes on this magic thing. It reminds me of stories I used to read about when they filmed Yoda and how that was, it seems like, of course, Yoda to all of us. When they filmed it, it was rather terrifying because here they have a very large role in a major movie follow-up that's going to be played by a puppet. And I can't even imagine sometimes pitching that idea. And yet George did it. But everybody talks about how when Mark performed with, Yoda, he treated him as a real character and he believed in him. And then when you watch the dailies, he just comes to life. And I felt that we all saw that happening with the child as we would film him, and he became a very living part of the crew. And nobody bought into that more than Werner Herzog. He was all in all the time on the child and his effect and how real it was. And he treated it like another actor on set.
Here he is, by the way. Guest appearance on the panel.
Oh my goodness.
The child in the show has a real, almost sad, doleful quality to its face. It looks really sad, and I realized looking at this and comparing it to the actual being, in the show, that sadness creates a vulnerability that makes you feel something for the character. Do you guys agree? Is that what the key to Baby Yoda's appeal is?
I don't know. I mean, I felt like, because I was coming in with the next show, where we were really going to have to meet and be introduced to the child. And so so one of the things for me was the challenge of having a main character who wears a mask, and how you sort of can convey a sense of what's going on when you have that. And so when I first got the script for the child, which I think was like 14 pages or something, I was like, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to tell this story about this bounty hunter and this kid, and try to, in this time frame, make people connect. And so to me, it was all about this young child's face and his discovery of the world, and his discovery of the world along with Mando sort of discovering or rediscovering who he was. And so it was for me really about using the child's face to sort of be the thing that I used to reflect Mando and somehow. And so we were just at the beginning of the process in terms of how we wanted to treat the puppet and how we would shoot it. But I think we all just made a decision early on. We were just going to treat the puppet like an actor. And we had these, we had legacy, these really incredible, craftsmen and artists that were a part of bringing the child to life. And, the expressions they could bring, and the sort of sense of connection that they were able to bring through the child's face was really incredible. And so, I played that card a lot because I knew, it was like the only face that I had to work with, but also knowing that we had to sort of make a connection with Mando and this kid in order to really for people to buy into to everything that was going to come on afterwards.
Deborah, so then in your episode, I remember talking to you after it aired, and you talked about the influence that your father had on your direction of this, and his love of Hong Kong action movies. And you kind of poured that into this fantastic sequence at the end, really like a classic Old West shootout, but with a Star Wars twist of the Mandalorians all emerging and having this gigantic battle in this little, Western town. Can you talk about those movies, your father, and how growing up watching those with him influenced this chapter of The Mandalorian?
Sure. My dad was a big movie fan, and he used to watch like a ton of Hong Kong cinema and Chinese soaps all the time. So that's kind of what he was always watching. So I don't know. I mean, it wasn't intentional, but I think I just sort of absorbed, it by default. So when I got the script for 3, I mean, I think the biggest reference for me was probably Yojimbo with the town standoff. But then as we started to get into it and a lot of the stuff in the hallways, it became more and more like hard boiled. And so I think I kept going back to John and saying, can I shoot more? Can I shoot more? We kept adding more pieces. So it was really fun, but it was kind of nice really using those sort of archetypes that, come from really classic cinema.
Bryce, I want to talk to you about Sanctuary because it introduces another very important component to The Mandalorian, which is the character of Cara Dune. Tell me about devising her introduction and how you wanted the audience to react to her when they first meet her.
Great question. I mean, it's meeting Gina the first time was so exciting because it was so clear, like when I first was talking with John about the project, and then John and Dave, and I hadn't met her yet, but I would go into the office and see all the concept art, and the concept art was her. And when I finally met her, it was so exhilarating, and I kind of had this aha moment for myself because I'm also an actor, that I was like, oh, this is why you cast the person. Like, this is why you just go for what is totally authentic, or you try to get the closest to it, because it's just a feeling. It's that you can't act it, especially if it's a character like Cara Dune, who is a warrior, and not just a warrior, a female warrior. And the fact that Gina herself is literally a warrior is something that is very unique for most human beings on the planet. And so, to launch a kind of it's not a new female archetype, but it's definitely one that's getting more real estate in a story and than is typical. And so a lot of thought went into that. And Gina was, it was her, and John was constantly kind of like really honing in on the backstory of her character, and writing and rewriting to just really get a voice for Cara Dune that was completely kind of connected to Gina herself, much like it's like Harrison Ford, and I guess all of his parts. Like, it's just that person. So the paying attention to like what she was going to look like in a way that Gina felt like, okay, I feel really empowered. I feel like I can do my thing in a scene. And it's something that can ideally be iconic, was really fun. We copied Deb's hair. We straight up copied her hair. Like, Deb always has amazing braids that she does, just like, casually get her hair out of her face. And we were like, we want that.
It's funny how often actors say they were inspired by Deb, because I think Emily Swallow, the actress who plays the chieftain of the armorer of the Mandalorian, said she based her performance on Deb's like coolness on set and her mastery of the set and control. So I feel like, you're like the hidden influence of it's like Kurosawa and Deb Chow and Sergio.
It was definitely unintentional. It was not intentional. I remember I was standing and I was shooting. I think I was shooting the scene with Emily, actually, in the armor. We were shooting that big scene, and all of a sudden, I think I was talking to John at the monitors, and all of a sudden, I feel these hands in my hair, and it's Bryce. Who's like talking to the hair and people behind me with Gina, and they start, and I'm like, no, anyway. It definitely wasn't by design.
Yeah, we're like, keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about us. Okay, we want it exactly like that. And then I think at one point after you had cut, I was like, so how do you do that? And you're like, oh, I like do this, this. And then you're like, you get back to directing your episode. Yeah.
Bryce, you also have this iconic moment where the child is sipping his bone broth that ended up being a meme and still turns up constantly on social media. Tell us about directing that scene, directing the puppeteers.
You want some soup?
The sipping the soup moment, what's interesting about that and a few other moments, and you asked a question earlier in regards to like, did we know that baby was going to have the impact on set? My kids were on set pretty much every day, and John's nodding his head, and even before we came to set, when it was like the storyboards for the episode with some of the previs and all of that, when we were just like kind of conceiving of things, my daughter would come in, and she was 6 at the time, into the editing room, And whenever baby wasn't on screen, she would like lean over to me and she'd go, where's baby? Where's baby? Where's baby? And John picked up on that. John was like, oh yeah. Like if the kid is wondering where's baby, then we need to know where baby is at all times. And so it was really clear that there was something, especially with kids, like all grown-ups were like, oh, but there was something with kids where baby was very real and baby was in danger, and they just needed to see what baby was doing at all times. And if not, you needed to really know that baby was safe.
Yep.
And so, from that there are a variety of moments that came up in the storytelling that were constructed just because we wanted to make sure that everyone knew that baby was safe.
What a miracle that with all the kids on the set and how fixated they were, that the secret never came out, that the baby was in the series at all. And I thought with all and Bryce, real testament to her that somehow she got her kids not to tell every single person they ever met about meeting him. So, and I remember you used to have like a whole ritual that you'd go through with the kids, right? To help reinforce.
Yep. I would remind my kids every day, once they were going to school, every day, what did we not talk about? Baby! And so it was really confusing for them once it came out. And I was like, baby, baby, baby. And they're like, Mom! Like they were super stressed out about it. But on set as well, I mean, all those kids were so fun and so great. And a lot of I reminded them quite a bit, and they knew how top secret it was. And I was like, it's going to be so cool. You're going to have this secret for a full year. And they're like, yeah. And then I'm like, and then you can tell everyone you knew the whole time. And they're like, yeah. And it's just, to me, seeing kids respond to baby, respond to the circumstance of, being on set, like seeing Mando, seeing like all of them. My kids called what were they? Oh my God. Because I always called them the Clatoonian Raiders, called them pug people. And so it's like, the fantasy comes alive even more and you're reminded of that. And this is, as Dave said, this is for kids,
So in your episode, you get to pay off a lot of the buildup that the previous directors set up in their episodes. We get to see Pedro Pascal take his mask off. We finally see what the Mandalorian looks like underneath.
I just came in at the end after these guys did all the heavy lifting.
They did all the heavy lifting, and then you get all the glory.
I just came in and just wrapped it all up.
Right? Yeah. You just sort of coasted is really what I'm saying. So does that make you feel shame or?
It's no longer a secret. What I do.
Well, what did you want? What was your hope for that moment when he takes his mask off? Because there's a lot of humor and there's a lot of action in that episode. But that was actually a very tender moment between
man and machine.
The audience really is man and machine, but also between him and the audience when we finally get to see the man who's hidden himself away. What was your thinking behind the emotion?
That was a particularly stressful day because we had so much we were getting through, and I remember, there was just like, the stormtroopers were all over the place, and then we were trying to have the place on fire or look like it was on fire, and having, there was so many characters and so many things that were happening all at once in that particular moment. I think I was just more stressed out about actually getting something in camera than how this was actually going to play out. I knew it was supposed to be an emotional moment, and I really loved the writing around IG-11 around his the way it says I'm not a living thing, and also it really struck me, I think, for that moment that the main character, we haven't seen the main character's face for this entire time. And you're managing to create and establish an emotional bond between this character and the baby. And maybe that is actually maybe that's what makes it so great and such an achievement, is to be able to believe in that relationship and to believe that this character cares for this baby, and it all happens, I think, when he finally grabbed his finger, those little moments where he just looks around and sees the baby in his, the little jump seat, and I think establishing those little moments throughout, like when I came along, for that final episode, those relationships were already there, and everyone was already in love with the baby. There was already a relationship with the baby on set that I had to learn, and and that was very fast for me as well to fall in love with the child.
That moment also is something important. It's not just man and machine, but man and his own past, because we spend so much of the series learning about how much he despises droids, and we learn about the violence that was perpetrated on his family and his tribe by droids. And here his life is saved by a droid.
That relationship between from his past with the droids and everything, and even just we tied it in with the fire behind IG-11 as well, which was linked to the everything on fire from his flashback. That was an important moment, and that and again, like, 'cause I hadn't managed to sort of see exactly how everything had turned out with all the other episodes. A lot of it was me just relying on John. So it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Am I doing this droid? Did he do this? And so that was, it was invaluable having people. And sometimes I'd call on some of the other directors as well. So.
Yeah, was there much interaction between all of you?
And, but it was very much a sort of familial feel around that. Like, there are people coming in and out of each other's sets all the time, giving people's act. I need that actor. Like, taking them on to another stage, or like, who's got the baby? Oh, okay, Deb's got the baby. She needs it for this other shot. And so there's a lot of like just swapping people in and out, and and like DPs like coming in and out of sets, and Baz, who I relied on a lot sometimes, going, I got to go over to the back lot and help out on this other thing, and. So that was, and it was, and I think everyone's very, very generous in that sense, that we all knew we were trying to get to the end and trying to move it together.
It was just fun being around everybody, and I felt like everyone was learning as we went, because no one had done Star Wars like this before. There were Star Wars live action shows, of course, but they were movies. They were different. This was fast. This was lean, and this was something that, we didn't even know how well it was going to work or if it was going to work. But we kind of all bonded, I think, together on that in the best way possible.
So we're all involved so early in the process, and had so much time to really think and talk about the process, which is different. And I didn't know what to expect coming into it, but to be involved so early, and to have everyone who was also involved, and at different stages, whether it was previs or people were prepping and others were shooting. I think we were all kind of in the mix together, and it was pretty exciting to just be able to have all those resources around to say, well, what do you think about this? Especially John and Dave.
Yeah, there was a very, I was really struck with that level of prep that there was. It had to be just with the tech that we were using and stuff. And it's more than I would usually do for my stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot about it, and I've got little pictures in my head of what it will look like, and then I'll sort of just turn up and then go, let's do it. But this was, I'm just realizing now after what you're saying, Rick, is that I was there for, it was a couple of months before I shot. Came in, and I kept coming in like each week to look at the boards and to look at designs and to look at the worlds and do scouting in the within the VR stuff and all that. It was very new to me, but also pretty exciting. And so it wasn't really like I just turned up. Actually, now I remember, I actually did quite a lot of work.
All right, we'll give you that. So we're about to wrap up, but we have a few questions from fans of the show who wrote in, and one of them is Josh Chisholm from Berkeley, California.
Oh, Josh, God, his questions.
He wants to know, you captured the feel of the original trilogy so well. Did the show use any archival camera gear? We know there was a lot of state-of-the-art work done with the LED screen and the volume, but did you use any kind of older gear, anything, lenses, cameras, consult with any of the crew who worked on the original trilogy in order to capture that texture of the?
Well, there are a few things we did. I mean, the lenses, we shot on Alexa, so it's digital, all digital, but we did use old lenses, and this was a big part of it. Was Greg Fraser was very instrumental in the first stages, because he had worked, our cinematographer, our original cinematographer, who came on and helped us understand how to use the technology. But he had also, already done Star Wars, and so like one of the things I was going to do is use a format like a 16:9 format that filled the screen, and he definitely said no. We should do it in a anamorphic, because that's part of what we associate with Star Wars, that aspect ratio, that letterbox aspect ratio. And sure enough, as we looked at footage that we were shooting in tests, and then we did it in anamorphic, it looked like Star Wars. So I think something about the anamorphic lenses, oftentimes we had like detuned old lenses to give it more of a vintage feel. That was a big part of it. A big part of it was also drawing upon old designs that had either not been used or were explored for other projects, old Macquarie stuff. We pulled a lot of that in. And also Doug Chang and all the art department. I mean, that's really the part. That's really when it hit that next level. There was a lot of collaborators that aren't represented here that really have an equal creative hand in it, in bringing it to this. And then, of course, Kathy Kennedy was always there from the very beginning, putting Dave and I together, and having worked with George, having run Lucasfilm before it was at Disney, having worked with Steven, and that whole generation that created this. And she was a really good mentor for just saying, hey, this is what we know about Star Wars. It gave it that legacy feel. And, when she did weigh in on things, it was generally with a lot of insight, usually having been curated from many conversations that she had had with other filmmakers associated with Star Wars. So it's one of those things where, although it feels as personal of a project as I've ever done, I don't think I've ever collaborated to this extent. And the workload of television also adds to that. And I think it was that sort of frenetic idea of the show must go on, you got to put that show on, I think tapped into a lot of the roots that Taika and Rick and myself had from independent film, and also Deb from being so prolific in television, of just knowing that you got to get it done. And it's about efficiency and about not second-guessing inspiration. And I really wanted to keep that alive. And of course, Dave came in with his background in animation, which informed our pre-production pipeline of how much you can plan for. And then Bryce, being also another one that, Dave and Bryce being the first time they had done like a full-length, a live action story, but they both brought a wealth of experience. And Bryce, having just been on sets and been in movies and understanding the way a crew works and how to break a scene, that's real world knowledge of how you get that story across. So it was a very, why I really like doing it, and I continue to enjoy doing it, is because it's, you start to, filmmaking and storytelling could be kind of a lonely game. And when you have all these people coming together, it makes it a team sport. And we learn things from the new people, and the new people learn things from the veterans. And it's like it's like having a sports franchise. It's like having a team that you get on the field, and everybody helps fill in each other's gaps, and we all learn from each other. And I think we all learned so fast compared to any other experience I've had, because you have that player coach team mentality that you just don't encounter in movies in the same way, because you're so isolated in some regards. So this is a very fun thing for now in my life, as I love to learn and I love to teach and break and experiment with new technologies too. We got to do all of that here. And so I think when you see the show, you're just getting the tip of the iceberg of what the whole experience was. That's why it's nice to do a panel like this, because I think our memories are a little bit of the memory is what came out on screen. A lot of it was having really had a great experience collaborating.
I think for me specifically with Star Wars too, what the show did really well is people always try to come on and say, well, what makes something Star Wars? Like that could be possibly tangible somehow. And I think people get obsessed with how Star Wars used to look or the way they interacted with it as a child. But if you can get authentic about it, you know, and when I've talked to the people at Lucasfilm that worked on the original movies, Dennis Muir and all these guys, when they made A New Hope and then they made Empire, they weren't trying to make Empire look like A New Hope. They were trying to take all the technology and everything learned and go forward with it. And now, though, we've inherited 40 years of history with Star Wars, so we're in a different place than they were in the beginning. But we still have a responsibility to say, well, this universe exists, so it feels a certain way, but we have to do what they used to do, which is take all the technological advances that we have to tell a story and tell the best possible story we can, use technology the best way. And I think John's knowledge of technology and where it's going and everyone's love of this galaxy that George created kind of fused together in the best possible way. So yes, we did build models of starships, but we looked at why we liked them and why we liked the way the model looked and why we liked how it moved. And then we would use both techniques and apply it going forward, and then just take those aesthetics, but then start to do things that they weren't capable of doing back in the 70s, because that's what they would have done. They're always furthering it. There's no doubt that the space battle in Return of the Jedi is better than what they did in A New Hope, and it doesn't bother you. And so it's taking all these kind of biases we have and what our childhood experiences were and saying, now I want to give, what you're trying to do is give kids that feeling. And that's what I think ultimately we were all trying to capture, and what we all, that's the common ground when you make something like Star Wars that is a franchise, but is deeply personal to so many different people. And so hopefully we were successful with that.
So the last question we have is from Bo Harris in Austin, Texas. And Bo is asking about what's on the horizon. Deborah Chow, you're working on an Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Taika, you're working on a new Star Wars film with the 1918 screenwriter Christy Wilson Cairns. And what's the status of those? Obviously, you don't want to give away your plot or anything, but where are you in the process of developing those?
It's all finished. I'm done. Yep.
Deb, how about you?
We have a little more to do than that, but yeah, we're in development still.
Excellent. And Dave and John, is there anything that you can say to close this out that's a little bit of a tease, or what fans should expect from season 2 of Mandalorian?
Well, we were lucky enough to have finished photography before the lockdown, so we're, you know, thanks to how technology forward Lucasfilm and ILM are, we've been able to do all of our visual effects and our editing and, you know, all of the post-production remotely through systems that had been set up by those companies for us. So we've been very efficient, and in that sense, so it will be available as planned in October on Disney Plus. And it's just, you know, we have hopefully building on what people love about the first season. And it just felt like one continuous production, because it's the rhythm of television. It's not like you get to stop. I think we started filming the day after it aired for the first time. So it doesn't feel like it's the next season. It just feels like we're continuing. And I, you know, and you know, as we explore partnering with new filmmakers and having new characters and going deeper with the characters we already have, it's really been very fun and fulfilling, and I hope people are having as much fun seeing it as we are having making it.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this virtual session at the ATX Television Festival on The Mandalorian. Everybody be well, be safe, keep working.